F1 was back in North America for the first time since 2019, and I think it's pretty safe to say that there was a lot going on in this race. There was a lot of action and a lot of stress in both the first and second half of this race. I'm really curious to see how we're going to score this. But of course, before we give our scores, let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. How'd you find the Grand Prix? Did you love it? Did you hate it? We want to hear from you. While you're down there, don't forget to leave this video a like. It helps out the channel, and hit that subscribe button as you won't want to miss any future videos. Cass, this first half had a whole lot going on, especially in that opening lap. What stood out to you? How'd you score it?
I predicted right away that we were going to get a 2015-esque opening lap, and boy, we sure did. Hamilton got the better start, pushed Verstappen wide. I was initially thinking, okay, the Mercs have had really good straight line speed here this weekend. Lewis is off to the races. But knowing that it was going to be a two-stopper, it pretty much threw everything up in the air, and that's when things got interesting. I had my excitement up at a 7 because I just knew that right away we were going to get a very long-winded battle for the lead. There was so much going on up at the front, in the midfield, even at the back. You had some cars spinning out of nowhere. You had some wheel-to-wheel action, which is also why I scored the racing up at an 8, because that Ferrari and McLaren sandwich was just pure perfection. I mean, for real, we had so many different battles going on between Carlos, Lando, Daniel, swapping back and forth. Obviously, you had a bit of a scuffle at the back with Lance and Latifi, our only Canadians, having an absolute nightmare of an opening lap. You had Gio, you had Alonso, you had Seb getting in the mix. There was just so much going on back and forth across the grid, and it was really fantastic to watch. It did get a little dirty at points, though, which is why I didn't give it a perfect score. And then for drama, I did only score it a 6, which is relatively high, but at the same point, a lot of it was more so around people seemingly playing bumper cars with each other, or the different pit stop strategies and how that was going to come into effect a bit later on. Puts my score for the first half at a 7.
It was also pretty funny because Max was taking on a strategist's role in this race, where he was basically telling his team what they should do for Perez's race, so that they can counteract whatever Lewis does when he comes into the pits. All in all, though, it sucks for Perez because he had one of the slower stops in this race. So overall, my excitement for this first half was around a 6. The racing, much like you, I had at an 8. That was opening laps, the battles between corner after corner. You had Valtteri trying to go up against Tsunoda. You had Kimi and Alonso going wheel to wheel. It was great to see those two fighting it out, and they were getting their elbows out, that's for sure. Their incidents is actually what gave my drama a score of an 8, because you had a lot of people calling into the FIA, hey, how come they're passing off the track? They're gaining an unfair advantage. So many positions given back. Even had Carlos, he said, I let Daniel through, but apparently it was Norris the one he was supposed to let through. So there was a whole bunch of kerfuffle. And with the whole drama of when people were going to pit or not during this race, it gave my drama a score of an 8. So when you combine all of my scores together for the first half, it comes out to a 7.3. I'll bring that down though to a 7.25. Of course, now, Cass, we're going into the second half of this race, and we still had no idea who was going to come out on top.
The second half was kick-started by Max coming into the pits, which once again, I did not see coming. I knew that Red Bull wanted to bring him in before Lewis's inevitable pit stop, but there was a little bit of debate as to whether they brought him in too soon. So it basically foreshadowed the entirety of the second half, where we were just left wondering, will Lewis be able to catch up? Will Max be able to hold on? It was so stressful and an absolute nail biter, and to the absolute finish.
Just what you love to see, though, a race coming down to the line, but it was key in this moment. Red Bull didn't want to give up track position because they deemed it harder to pass without passing in the pit lane.
It just kind of goes to show that they learned their mistakes from the Spanish Grand Prix and were able to adapt. But to be fair, they also very much had the favorable car today.
So very, very stressful final laps. Traffic was getting involved. Cass, how'd you score it?
I had my excitement still relatively high at a 7, but I think a lot of that was just coming down to stress because there was a lot less happening overall in the second half. It seemed like people kind of settled into their positions. We did have some battles. They just weren't very clean. So I did put the racing down at a 5. It just wasn't anything spectacular, especially in comparison to what we saw in that initial first half. But then drama I had back up at a 7 because, oh my god, like, everyone was just on the edge of their seats waiting for that last lap to see if the gap would really close or not. But I also only scored a 7 because it was the only thing happening that was dramatic. So overall, that puts my second half at a 6.3. I'm going to bump that down to a 6.25.
For me, my excitement, believe it or not, was at a 10. I have to give it a 10. I mean, I've never been so invested leading up into these final moments. No idea who was going to win this race. I know I say that a lot, but this time, it really came down to the line. You had traffic getting involved. You had a bunch of other overtakes happening at the same time on the track that we didn't get to see, but at least the fight for first place that we were watching was really engaging. Overall, I'm just hoping every race can be just this uncertain all the way down to the end. In terms of my racing though, much similar points to you, I did score it a 6 only because there were fewer battles and they were getting a bit messy out there. And just how messy those wheel-to-wheel battles were, it kind of associated to my drama, which I scored a 7. There were several black and white flags that were given out to the traffic, which was causing a whole nother level of stress for the end. But all in all, this traffic is what ended up allowing Max Verstappen to keep Hamilton at bay to win the race. Thus, when you combine all of my scores together, it comes out roughly to a 7.6. I'm going to bring that down though to a 7.5 for the second half of this race. So when you combine both of our scores together, the US Grand Prix comes out to a total score of a 7. Here's how it compares to the other races so far this season. We only have 5 races left. That's not a lot of time. Max has an even bigger gap than he did coming into this week. Will he be able to hold it off in the next few races to come? We'll have to tune in and find out. So now with the scores aside, it's time to get into our segment of Driver Watch. We're going to take one of the 20 drivers from today's race and review how they did. Let's see who we get. Well, funny enough, it's Verstappen, who we did see a lot of on TV. What'd you think of his race?
Honestly, we've clearly touched on him a lot in this video, but I think it should be noted that this probably was one of the best drives of his career. He stayed pretty calm and collected throughout the entire thing. It was a very dominant performance because you have to think here, this is also one of Hamilton's best performances, I think, of the season. So the fact that these two drivers gave us such an impeccable show, remarkable. And the fact that Verstappen was able to put in basically a flawless drive, aside from losing the lead on the opening lap, but everything else after that was virtually perfect.
It was really interesting to hear from his perspective after the race. He was questioning the decision from his team if he could actually pull it off and make those tires last. And it was also really interesting to hear him say that the team put him in a really difficult situation. You don't really get that from Max. So overall, a fantastic race from Max. Aside from that first corner, I was really nervous that at some point they were going to collide, but we also didn't even get to see them go wheel to wheel in this race, aside from that opening lap.
An incredibly impressive showing from Max today. I mean, this title fight has just been so entertaining throughout the entire season, and I would love it if it came down to the last race and we got a complete shock, not knowing who's going to end up on top. That would just be the best way to finish off a truly wonderful and exciting season.
We can't wait to see what's to come, and we'll hope to see you there joining us for our next race review. Don't forget to let us know your thoughts down in those comments. Who do you think is going to win the championship? Who's going to win in our next race in Mexico? Leave this video a like, hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Bye.